Long ago, in the sun-warmed town of Kamoro, there lived a young man named Obasi. He was the town's most trusted healer, a man whose hands brought comfort and hope to the sick. Obasi was not just skilled with herbs and medicine, he carried, in his heart, a deep desire to ease people's pain. In all of Kamoro, no doctor was loved the way he was. Obasi never chased after riches. If a poor woman walked into his hut carrying her coughing child, he would simply say, "Keep your coins. Mama, let me care for your little one. Life is hard enough." And so the poor of Kamoro cherished him. To them, Obasi was not only a healer, but a blessing sent by the ancestors. But Obasi's kindness didn't go unnoticed by the wealthy. The rich men and women of Kamoro admired his selflessness and integrity. They brought him gifts, golden bangles, goats, plots of land, and even a sleek, shining wagon with leather seats. Soon, Obasi had more than enough to live like a king. But still, he lived simply, choosing to focus on his patients rather than his possessions. With his growing fame came a flood of attention from women across Kamoro and neighboring villages. But Obasi had no interest in romance. His days were swallowed by the cries of the sick and the smell of burning herbs. He barely had time to rest, let alone fall in love. And so, year after year, he remained unmarried, a mystery to many. Everything changed the day he met Abeni. Abeni had just completed her national service and found work as a bank cashier in Kamoro's central bank. She was sharp with numbers and gentle with people, always wearing a soft smile behind her counter. On a warm Thursday morning, Obasi stepped into the bank to withdraw some money. The moment Abeni saw him, she noticed something different. Men and women from every corner of the bank turned to greet him. "Hey, Obasi! You saved my sister's life," one woman whispered. Another man clapped him on the back. "My mother still prays for you every day, doctor." Abeni watched in quiet wonder as customer after customer reached for his hand. She leaned in slightly, listening. From their words, she pieced together a portrait of the man before her. Not only was he a doctor, he was a kind one who never turned anyone away, rich or poor. Something inside Abeni stirred. She hadn't even spoken to him yet, but already her heart leaned in his direction, and Obasi, tall, with strong shoulders and skin the color of roasted cola, was not easy to ignore. His voice, low and calming, drifted through the bank like music. He had the look of a man who had known both hardship and healing, and the way he moved with quiet confidence made Abeni's breath catch in her throat. Finally, Obasi turned his attention to her. He smiled apologetically. "Forgive me, I didn't mean to keep you waiting. This bank always turns into a village meeting whenever I show up." Abeni chuckled shyly. "It's all right. You seem very loved." Obasi looked at her closely, then really looked. Abeni was tall and light-skinned, her frame delicate, her eyes wide like a startled antelope's. Her voice was soft but clear, and her presence had a quiet strength to it. Obasi wasn't the kind of man to flirt, but something about her pulled him in. "My name is Dr. Obasi," he said, offering his hand, "but most people here just call me Obasi. I come here quite often, but I don't believe we've met." Abeni's cheeks flushed. "I'm Abeni. I just started last week. Finished my service and was lucky enough to be posted here." Their conversation flowed like a calm river. As they spoke, people in the bank began to notice. Heads turned, smirks crept onto faces. The spark between them was too obvious to hide. Suddenly, the bank's manager, Madame Neander, stepped out from her glass office. A round woman with a voice that could command silence in a market. She made her way to the counter, smiling wide. "Ah, Dr. Obasi," she said, eyes twinkling. "This is a rare sight, you standing here laughing with a woman." Obasi chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Madame Neander turned to Abeni and said, "My dear, you must know, every single lady in Kamoro has tried her luck with this man. None has succeeded. You must be quite special." With that, she walked, back into her office, leaving Obeni stunned and Obasi smiling quietly. In that moment, something shifted. Obeni had known Obasi was admired, but she hadn't realized he was single. Why, she wondered. How could a man like that be alone? But now she knew. And she also knew something else. She wanted to know him better. Before Obasi left the bank, he turned to her once more. "Would you join me for dinner tonight?" he asked. "I'd like to talk more, away from all these curious eyes." Though Obeni tried to hide it, her heart did a somersault. "I'd like that," she replied with a gentle smile. "Where should I meet you?" "I'll send for you," he said, and with that, Obasi left the bank. As he walked out, every eye in the room turned to Obeni, some with envy, some with excitement. Obeni, trying to keep her face calm, returned to her desk, but inside she was dancing. All day the clock seemed stuck. Every second dragged like a slow drumbeat. At last the big hand hit 5. Obeni gathered her things, dashed out of the bank, and hurried home. She opened her small wooden wardrobe and picked out her finest dress, a soft yellow gown with tiny beads at the hem. She tied a scarf around her head, dabbed perfume behind her ears, and whispered to her reflection, "Tonight is special." At the restaurant, Obasi was already waiting. The table had been set with care, fresh flowers in a calabash, 2 clay lanterns glowing gently, and plates waiting to be filled. As Obeni stepped in, Obasi rose to his feet. Their eyes met, and the story of Obasi and Obeni truly began. Obasi wanted Obeni to see a side of him she hadn't yet, refined, thoughtful, and intentional. So he chose one of the most elegant restaurants in Kamoro for their dinner. It was the kind of place that required reservations days in advance, but Obasi had somehow secured a private table that very afternoon. When Obeni stepped in and saw the candles flickering in carved wooden holders and fresh hibiscus flowers spread across crisp linen, her breath caught in her throat. She was touched, not just by the beauty of the place, but by the effort Obasi had made to impress her. The way he pulled out her chair, the gentleness in his voice, the way he laughed freely at her jokes, it all made her feel like the only woman in the world. As they dined on spiced tilapia and soft yam rolls, they talked for hours. They shared stories of growing up, Obasi's tales of running barefoot through mango orchards, Obeni's memories of fetching water before school. They spoke of their university days, of dreams that had shifted and hopes that remained. Laughter danced between them, and the soft drums playing in the background seemed to hum in time with their hearts. Obasi looked into her eyes and with quiet certainty asked, "Obeni, will you be mine?" Obeni raised an eyebrow, playfully. "You're asking me to be your woman on the very first date?" He grinned. "They say the brave win life's best blessings, and I feel tonight the ancestors might be smiling on me." That answer struck something deep within her. She saw it then, not just charm, but courage. Obasi wasn't playing games. He meant it, and so, with a small but unmistakable smile, Obeni nodded, "Yes, I'll be yours." What neither of them had yet shared was the deeper truth that connected them more tightly than they knew. They were both untouched, both virgins. Though they had each been in relationships before, neither had given themselves away, not because of fear, but because of the value they placed on waiting until marriage. It wasn't until many moons later, while sitting together in Obasi's compound under the stars, that the truth spilled out. Obeni spoke first. "Obasi," she said, "I know we love each other and we've grown so close, but before things go further, I want you to know, I've never been with a man. I'm waiting for the one who'll stand beside me before the elders and the gods. I hope this doesn't change how you see me." Obasi turned to her slowly, eyes wide, not with shock but with wonder. "You too?" he asked. "Abeni, I've never been with a woman. I've waited all these years for my wife. I thought I was alone in that." They stared at each other for a long time, then burst into quiet laughter, the kind that shakes with relief. Their hearts danced. The wait hadn't been in vain. They had both been preserved for one another. From that moment, their bond grew deeper. They decided to marry, but not in haste. They gave themselves 6 months. 6 months to learn each other's moods, quirks, and beliefs. They wanted to build something strong, not just sweet. They planned to meet each other's families, understand each other's ways, and make peace with one another's pasts before stepping into the future together. Work blossomed too. Obasi was seeing more patients than ever. People from neighboring villages came to Kamoro just to be treated by the famous doctor with gentle hands. Meanwhile, Abeni was promoted at the bank, now trusted with handling larger accounts and supervising junior tellers. Life was kind, their love steady. And soon, the 6th moon arrived. Wedding preparations began in full swing. They traveled across Kamoro searching for the perfect wedding hall. They hired decorators from Ucheba and caterers from Iboke. Everything had to be just right. Only one thing remained: Abeni's wedding gown. One bright morning, Abeni set out to the market, walking through rows of colorful fabrics and crowded stalls. She entered boutique after boutique, but none of the gowns spoke to her heart. As she stepped out of yet another shop, she froze. Standing in front of her was a man she hadn't seen in years. Ikenna, her old flame. "Ikenna," she said, blinking. He smiled and took a step forward. "Abeni, it's been so long." Abeni's heart thudded with old memories, mostly bitter. Ikenna had been her first boyfriend back at university. They'd shared long walks and laughter, but their relationship ended badly. He had always pressured her, always asking for what she wouldn't give. When she refused, he left her for someone else. Still, she greeted him politely. "It really has been long. What brings you to Kamoro?" "I'm shopping for materials," he said smoothly. "And you?" "I'm getting married," Abeni replied, her voice proud. "I'm just looking for a wedding gown." Hearing that made Ikenna's chest tighten. The fire in his eyes darkened. "She's marrying someone else. After all the time I spent chasing her, I never touched her, and now another man will? Never." The thoughts swirled fast and hot. With forced cheer, he said, "You won't find anything special here, but my sister sells gowns, and she keeps a few samples in my house. She's not home now, but I can show you what she has." Abeni hesitated. "They're really beautiful," he added. "Custom-made, and you won't get better quality for that price." Wanting to believe he had changed, and eager to finish her. "Shopping," Abeni agreed. As they reached his compound, Ikenna unlocked the door, stepped aside, and gestured her in. Once inside, he shut the door behind them, firmly. Then he pulled the curtains shut, one by one. Abeni felt her heart race. "Where is your sister?" she asked. Ikenna turned slowly. "She's not here." "And the gowns?" "There are no gowns." Abeni stepped back. "Open the door, Ikenna." But his smile vanished, replaced by something twisted. "You wouldn't give yourself to me then," he growled. "But now that you belong to someone else, I will have you." She screamed. She fought, but he was stronger and she couldn't break free. When it was over, he laughed coldly. "Now that I've had my share, go and give him what's left." He sneered. Then he shoved her out and slammed the door. Abeni stood outside, trembling, her soul shattered. She staggered home, not feeling her legs, her spirit heavy like a stone in deep water. How would she tell Obasi? How could she explain that the man who violated her was someone she once loved? She sat in silence for hours, her mind replaying the horror over and over. She felt broken, betrayed by fate. But she knew one thing: she couldn't lie. Obasi deserved the truth. Whether it destroyed them or not, she had to tell him what had happened, and so, with a heart full of pain, Abeni prepared to speak. Abeni returned to Obasi's home just before the sun could set. Her clothes were wrinkled, her scarf half fallen from her head, and her entire body trembled as though she had walked through a storm. Obasi, who had been waiting inside, rushed to the doorway the moment he saw her. One look at her broken figure sent fear into his chest. He held her by the shoulders, his voice shaking. "Abeni, what happened to you?" Tears filled her eyes. Her mouth opened, then closed, but after a deep breath, she found the strength to speak. "It was Ikenna," she whispered. He forced himself on me." Obasi felt the weight of her words slam into him like a falling tree. He stumbled backward and dropped onto his wooden bench, clutching his head with both hands. He didn't speak. His breath grew heavy. The woman he had loved, waited for, and promised to marry, his pure bride, was now shattered. "How?" he finally muttered. "How could this happen?" But before she could respond, he sprang to his feet, rage bursting through him. "Take me to him. Show me where Ikenna lives," he shouted. Abeni shook her head quickly, grabbing his arm. "No, Obasi, please don't. You'll do something terrible. You might not come back from it." But her refusal only deepened his anger. His voice rose. "Why are you protecting him? Why won't you let me face him?" Obasi's fury burned through, his chest like hot coal. The more he thought, the more suspicion crept in. He turned his back on her, pacing. Why was she in Ikenna's house to begin with? Why didn't she stop him? Could it be she went there willingly? Could it be she wasn't forced at all? His mind spiraled. Abeni could see the doubt forming in his eyes. She stepped forward. "Obasi, please believe me. I didn't know what he was planning. I only followed him because he said his sister had wedding gowns." But Obasi wasn't hearing her anymore. His heart, once full of love, now boiled with betrayal, even though she had done nothing wrong. He turned slowly toward her, eyes hard. "Whether you were forced or not, the truth remains. You're no longer the woman I planned to marry." Abeni gasped, her hands flying to her chest. Obasi, no. But he shook his head. "I've waited all my life to give myself to one woman, and now I can't." She fell to her knees before him, begging, "Please, don't do this. I didn't." "Choose this! You know I loved you with all my heart." But Obasi's pain had consumed his reason. "Our wedding is off." Abeni collapsed onto the floor, weeping into her hands. The love they built was gone in a single breath. The next day, Obasi packed his bags. He couldn't bear to stay in Kamoro. The memories, the pain, it was too much. He left behind the clinic, the home, the neighbors who loved him, and moved far away to a small village called Ikat, hoping the distance would bury his sorrow. He bought a new house and opened another clinic. And, as always, his reputation grew. People in Ikat soon began calling him the healer from the gods. His gentle hands treated wounds and cured fevers. Mothers brought their babies, elders came with walking sticks, and within weeks, Obasi became the heart of the village. But no one knew the truth. Inside him, something dark had broken. The pain of what happened to Abeni had twisted itself around his mind like a snake. He couldn't sleep without seeing her face. But instead of grieving, Obasi allowed his anger to fester into something else, something evil. One morning, a young girl about 19 came into the clinic holding her stomach. She was slim, with soft eyes and caramel skin, just like Abeni. As soon as Obasi saw her, old memories came crashing in. He asked quietly, "Are you a virgin?" The girl nodded, confused. In that moment, Obasi snapped. He locked the door behind her and did what he had never done before. He took from her what wasn't his. When he was done, he looked her in the eye and said, "Don't speak of this." "No, one will believe you. I am the village's beloved doctor." The girl, terrified and ashamed, ran home without a word, and it didn't stop there. Obasi began targeting young girls who came alone. He would ask if they were virgins, and if they were, he would close the door and do what he pleased, then threaten them into silence. Month after month, he continued his cruel secret. The people of Ikat still saw him as a kind man. Mothers still thanked him, children still waved at him in the streets, but beneath his warm smile was a man eaten by trauma and revenge. To him, the world had taken something precious, so now he was taking from the world, but fate was watching. One day, whispers began to spread among the youth. A few girls, afraid but unable to keep quiet any longer, began to tell each other the truth. One girl, Chika, broke down and told her older sister Tumi everything, what Obasi had done to her, how he locked the door, and what he said afterward. Tumi was shocked. "Are you sure? Dr. Obasi?" "No, it can't be." But Chika insisted, crying harder. Tumi decided she needed proof. She had to see it with her own eyes to believe it, so she made a plan. She found a tiny dried gourd and filled it with ground chili pepper. Then she borrowed a hidden sound recorder from her cousin in the next village. One hot afternoon, Tumi dressed plainly and walked to the clinic with a heavy heart. Obasi welcomed her in. "You look tired. What brings you?" "I've been feeling dizzy," Tumi said softly. He nodded and asked her to sit. Then, just like the others, he asked the question, "Are you still a virgin?" Tumi looked down and whispered, "Yes." And with that, Obasi locked the door. He began moving toward her, just like Chika had described. His eyes darkened and his voice changed, but Tumi was ready. She reached into her wrapper, pulled out the gourd, and threw the powder straight into his eyes. Obasi screamed in pain, stumbling backward, clawing at his face. My eyes! My eyes! What have you done?" Tumi switched on the recorder. Obasi, in his agony, yelled out, "Tumi! You dared pour pepper in my eyes. Do you know who I am? I am Obasi. I will have my way with all the virgins in Ikat. Do you hear me? You may have escaped, but I will find you." His confession rang out clearly into the recorder, even as he kicked over his stool and flailed around the room. Tumi didn't wait. She unlocked the door and ran straight to the village square. Obasi had no idea that Tumi was still hiding inside his clinic when he began shouting in rage. Her small frame stayed crouched behind a wooden shelf as she quietly held the recorder. Every word he spoke, his threats, his twisted confession, was captured. Once Tumi had enough evidence, she slowly crept out of the clinic, while Obasi stumbled around, still crying from the pepper in his eyes. He was too blinded by pain to notice her slipping out. After pouring a basin of water over his face and rubbing his eyes raw, he muttered under his breath, "I'll get her next time. Even if she tells the elders, they won't believe her. I'm too respected in this village. I'm their beloved doctor." But Obasi didn't know that the truth was already on its way to the palace. That very evening, Tumi went to the king's court with trembling hands and a bold heart. She bowed before the elders and declared, "There is a man in Ikat village who has been forcing himself on our daughters, and I can prove it." The king was shaken but wise. He said nothing to alert the villagers or the accused. Instead, he called for an emergency meeting at the town hall that very night. Every elder, every household head, and every respected man and woman in Ikat was summoned. No reason was given. They were only told, "It concerns the safety of our children." By sundown, the great hall was full. Curious murmurs filled the space. Obasi sat near the front, as always, dressed in white, calm and smiling, his eyes still red but his pride unshaken. Then the room fell silent. To everyone's surprise, it was Tumi who stepped forward. She held a recorder in her hand and stood tall before the crowd. Obasi shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but he kept his smile. He had always counted on the people's loyalty. Who would believe a young girl over their trusted doctor? Tumi raised her voice. "There is a man among us who pretends to heal, but instead harms. A man who preys on virgins, who locks his doors and takes what isn't his. That man is Obasi, The one you all trust. Gasps filled the hall. A respected elder stood up in disbelief. What are you saying, child? Dr. Obasi is a noble man. Obasi folded his arms smugly. He knew these people would defend him. But Tumi was ready. Listen for yourself, she said, and pressed play. Obasi's voice echoed through the hall like a cursed drumbeat. I must have my way with all the virgins in Ikat. You may have escaped today, but I will find you. The silence afterward was deafening. Then came the cries, first from one girl, then another. Slowly, the victims rose to their feet, trembling one by one, sharing their truths. Their parents wept in shock and shame. In moments, the village's love for Obasi turned into outrage. He stood up and tried to flee, but the crowd surged forward and blocked the exits. They grabbed him and dragged him to the center of the hall. Obasi fell to his knees, weeping. I wasn't always like this, he cried. It was after Abeni, my fiancée, was defiled. I loved her. I saved myself for her. And when she was taken from me, something inside me broke. I lost my way. Some elders lowered their heads. A few villagers whispered. But the parents of the victims shouted louder. No! Pain is not an excuse for evil. The king stood, his voice firm. In Ikat, we do not allow monsters to wear the mask of kindness. And so, Obasi was sentenced to public flogging, stripped of honor and dignity before all. His cries filled the air as the lashes landed, but justice in Ikat did not end with punishment alone. The families of the victims pressed for more. They took him to the regional authorities, and Obasi was tried. Under the full weight of the law, he was found guilty and sentenced to years of imprisonment, locked away from the lives he had shattered. And as the moon lit up the roofs of Ikat that night, peace slowly returned. The wounds would take time to heal, but the truth had finally been spoken. Moral of the tale, even the purest heart can rot when it feeds on pain instead of healing. Obasi allowed grief to turn him into the very monster he hated. But no matter your sorrow, it is never a reason to harm others. The world is full of injustice, yes, but do not let it steal your goodness. Your choices are still yours.